you in a second how you can create high margins in a service business. But they do have the potential for high margins, but almost always they have high cash flow because there's not a tremendous amount of capital intensive reinvestment that must occur in a service business. We don't have to buy inventory. We don't have developers we have to buy. Oh, I'm getting a little ahead, right? But basically, you sold work for 100 grand. Your cost on that work was 50, and then there's 50 grand left over. And next month, you're going to sell the same work for 100 grand, and the cost you 50, and there's going to be another 50 left over, and you can pocket that. And so they tend to be very stable, very high cash flow businesses. And I would say the majority of them, if you do a decent job, have pretty good retention because people don't want to learn it and they don't want to do it. So what sucks about this business? Talent is the bottleneck. Right? You finding good people is going to be the difficult part of this business. Whether you're trying to find HVAC technicians, plumbers, electricians on the home services side, if you're trying to find maids on the low skill side, very difficult. So all the way up, it's always hard because even at the lowest skill, if we use maids as the lowest skill labor for a service business as an example, well then just finding people who speak English, show up on time, are competent, and actually do a good job cleaning, and want to work for the amount of pay that the pricing package that you have allows for some margin is difficult. That's the hard part. If you go up a level in terms of like, I would say, trades, then finding the tradesmen who are good and experienced and can do more complex work becomes difficult. So it's a more supply constrained business. If you go white collar, then you've got accountants, lawyers, management consultants, investment bankers, right? All of these people require a ton of education, a ton of learning. And so most of those, like the ones I just mentioned, management consulting, investment banking, legal, like they all have multi-year learning paths before they're really even allowed to do work on their own. And so when you have multi-year kind of gestation periods for the talent, that becomes one of the big things that sucks about the business. And I'll tell you how to fix that in a second, but that's one of the big things that sucks. And oftentimes when you have one of these businesses, the founder tends to be, not always, but tends to be one of the best technicians. And so this is a double-edged sword because you know how to do it better than everyone. And as a result, people tend to always come to you in order to solve the big complex problems, which makes your life big and complex all the time, which kind of sucks. And the last piece is that it's just slower to scale than the other three models. So what is the big problem that you have to solve with this business? If we believe that hiring, onboarding, and training talent so if we take the position, which I do, that supply or the supply of good talent is the hardest part about this business, then one of the core components of your business must become your attraction, as in your recruiting process, how you onboard those people, and how you train them. Because if we think about a business as the difference between the value of the inputs and the value of the outputs, that delta is where profit is created. You are creating value in the economy. And so you take raw materials, people who are underskilled, you have a way of bringing them in, adding value, giving them skills, teaching them, and then you can sell that skill set at a higher premium later. That's the idea. Now, where you have a 201 version of this is where you have 3 or 4 different people that all have different skill sets, that the aggregate of 3 or 4 of those skill sets put together becomes even, the sum is greater than, some of the whole is greater than the parts, right? You get even more gross profit. And that's where this gets a little bit more interesting. And so that core has to be one of the things that you do exceptionally well. And if you're like, well, we don't really do that very well in our business. No shit. That's why most service businesses don't scale. And the second element that you really want to focus on is like, how many ways can you reduce your own founder technical expertise? The business's dependence on your technical expertise. How can I productize my own knowledge to such a degree? And what you have to get very good at doing is you have to get very good at teaching. Fundamentally, like if you're in a service business, you're actually in a teaching business. You have to teach your talent how to do what they do. And I think this is one of the big mess ups is people expect, oh, I'm going to train some guy in a weekend to do something that's taken me 10 years, and then I'm going to get upset that he's not that good. Ridiculous, right? We have to have far more robust training for these people, but as a result, it's more front-loaded than most people expect. But if you do that well, those people ramp up faster, they stick longer, you're able to charge longer premiums, and your reputation continues to compound over time. So, how do you win with this model? So number one is that most service businesses, especially in the beginning, is they do any kind of work for any kind of person with a pulse. Very normal. But as soon as you start to develop a little bit of business chops, you start to say, okay, some of these clients suck, some of these clients are great, we do a better job with this. And so you start to narrow down who your real customer should be. This happens usually in the $1 to $3 million range is when you start to have to make those decisions. In the beginning, you're just trying to make money, fine. But when you really want to scale, Like you have to start deciding what business you're really going to be in. And usually it's around, like I said, 1 to 3 million. That's when you decide what business you're really in. And then that's where you really start going on this path. But in order to do that, we have to decide on what customer we're going to really serve. And then as a result, because we have one consistent customer, we should only have 1, 2, 3 max consistent deliverables that we're giving. So then we can start systematizing or productizing the way that we deliver our services. So rather than everything being bespoke or just saying whatever you want, your wildest dreams is what I can deliver. You then say, you probably want this problem solved. We solve it in 1 of 3 ways. This is the way that I think is best for you. And then here's how we do it. And then you can start driving operational efficiency within the business, which then expands the gross margins. Okay. Now, in order to do that operationalized bucket of things, it becomes more repeatable for you to then build training process to each of those desired steps or outcomes in the systematized delivery. And so that then the systematized delivery then feeds into the operational infrastructure in terms of onboarding, hiring, and training and talent selection on the way in. All right. And so when we do these 2 steps, then the next thing is that you'll end up having to replace yourself in some level of the operations at some point so that you can lead the company. So if you were trying to win here, systematization of delivery, selection of the avatar, being very clear about recruiting, hiring, onboarding, and training, and having very good defined career paths for your talent so they want to stay with you and not go somewhere else because they're so hard to get. And so if you're in that business, typically getting customers is not that hard. And so then we think, okay, if then we can just blow the back end out so we can have 10, 20, 30 new amazing people who are getting activated per month on my delivery side, I can finally, the goal that you want to have is that you want to have an amazing reputation and actually get to the point in a service model where your demand is the constraint. Very rare, but doable. Now, in this business, where do I reinvest my capital, right? So I said this is very high cash flow. So number one is that this is a business that you can live well throughout the entire time of doing the business, which is why I've always been a fan of service businesses. The other business models that exist here, 2 of them, basically the founder almost never makes any money until a point of an exit. And let's be real, exits are far rarer than people try and make them out to be. And so service businesses, you can kind of live your life and continue to scale your income as it goes up. Now, where do you invest your cash? So you want to invest your cash in 2 core places. Number 1 is going to be talent, meaning you want better, smarter people who are coming in. So the raw materials that are coming in, we want to increase the quality of those raw materials. Now we still have the training that we have, but if you're training a genius versus training a dodo bird, training the genius is still going to work better. So we want higher base level people, higher horsepower, higher intelligence. If we look at the ultimate versions of some of the highest grossing service businesses out there, what do they all have? They have unbelievable talent machines and they attract the best and brightest, right? So number 1 is that you're going to be reinvesting money into the recruiting side of the business so you can get the best talent. The other side that you're going to be putting money into is going to be brand, right? Now, brand is going to benefit in both places. One, it's going to allow you to charge premium prices over time. And it's also going to allow you to attract premium level talent because they want the association. They have their own personal brand. They want their association with your brand. Now, the way that I can see how scaled up or how progressed an entrepreneur is in the service business is actually with one metric, which is what they charge. So think about how interesting. So I'll explain why I think this is a very interesting, like North Star metric. If you do a good job at what you do, then you should have a supply constraint in your business because more people want your services. If more people want your services and you're supply constrained, what happens? Well, if we're supply constrained and we have more demand than we have supply, what should we do? We should raise our prices. And as we raise our prices, we should increase our gross margins. And as long as we have good training and we can maintain our reputation, what happens? More customers come in, more demand, and then we can continue to raise our prices. And so it should be a process of consistently being able to raise price over time and go after better and better avatars, better and better ICPs, if you want to use that language, ideal customer profile, I think that stands for. Basically the type of customer that you're going after, right? The prospects. You want better and better people who can write stroke bigger and bigger checks. And the only way to do that is to typically have the track record, having done this for years and continuing to level up. And you can only do that if you're good because you have more demand than you have supply. And that's the game that you ultimately want to be in. Now, is there a world for a low-cost service provider? Yes, with one very important caveat. You have to decide day one when you build this business that you're building it as the low-cost provider. And that doesn't mean, oh, people didn't want to buy this price, I'm going to go cheaper. It means that day one, every decision you've made with that North Star, which is that we want to be as operationally efficient as humanly possible. So we're going to offshore all of our talent. We're going to have as much automation built into our business as humanly possible. And our primary USP or selling proposition is going to be